Hi everyone, Morphy here. I'm here today with Irish Swede, and we met, I think, on an after party of Neil 604 Atheists, and I thought you just had such an interesting story, especially since I think when I met you, you'd actually just got out of surgery, and since the only thing that I actually bring to the atheist community is the odd witty, sort of comment, I was somewhat hamstrung by the fact at the time I couldn't make you laugh. So hopefully
Randolph tried to kill me by making me laugh that whole night.
So presumably you're feeling much better now.
Yes, that after party was 3 weeks post-op, and I was still very much in pain from any pressure on my chest. It was open heart surgery, and so my sternum up, down, all the way was split open, and I was split open. So at that point, my sternum was still in two pieces and being held together by wire, and couldn't cough. It was so bad that my body would actually stop me from coughing. So I had to be very careful about drinking and eating, because my body's ability to do its natural reaction to stop yourself from choking wasn't up to snuff. So yeah, it was lots of fun when Randolph got on and tried to make me laugh and keel over, split my chest back open.
So was it an artificial heart valve that you had put in?
Yes, it is an artificial valve. It's known as a St. Jude's valve. And the reason it's called that because St. Jude's Research Hospital is the one that developed it 30, 40 years ago. And it audibly clicks. So if you were sitting next to me in a quiet movie theater, you would think somebody left the turn signal on in the car. And it replaced the upper aorta valve, which is known as your widowmaker valve. And that had aneurysed, and then the aorta itself, which comes out of the top of your heart and then goes down to your kidneys and leg, had started to dissect. And you have three walls inside that aorta, and the first two had gone. And that third one, if that third one went, there's no saving you. You're gone. And the fact that it had gone through two and not the third one is a 1 in 20 million shot. And so for some reason, pure luck, or I rolled a whole bunch of D20s and hit a natural 20 the whole time, I survived that long. And as far by that long, I mean just a few hours, able to get me into surgery and get the bypass going. And by that time, the odds had switched. Once I was on the operating table, I was a 20 million to 1 to survive rather than the other way. So very thankful for modern medicine. And all the doctors, nurses, med techs, physical therapists, occupational therapists, respiratory therapists, you name it, on down the line, every person in the hospital. Because if you think about it, when you have something like this, you are in the hospital for a long time. And in the current environment, you're alone because of Corona. And, you can't have visitors. So you are very lonely and very, and I keep using the word very, I shouldn't, because it's a lazy word, but it's frustrated. It's frustrating because you can't, like my wife couldn't be with me. My wife couldn't bring my kids in to see that daddy is okay. Now with modern technology, you have FaceTime and things like that, but it's not the same. It's nowhere near the same. And I would, 5 days in the hospital. Luckily, for the first 4 hours after I woke up, they let my wife be near my side, but then they kicked her out, and I didn't get to see her again until she picked me up outside the hospital.
So you're quite a young guy, certainly a young guy compared to me, because I've got knees that I can actually hear when I get out of bed in the morning. And so have we, any idea, what caused this, why this happened?
It is genetic. Every time somebody has an aortic dissection, it's either because they're 85 years old and their body is failing, or it happens when you're young and it's genetic. And it's genetic for me. So starting in September, I start going through the genetic testing. It is one of 27 genes that can cause this. And so we're going to try and figure out which one. And obviously then we have to get my kids tested to see which one, if it's begun to express itself. And my kids are 4 and 2, so it's very unlikely that there will be an expression, or this may be a recessive thing that's just not going to express at all when it comes to my kids. But then we have to go back up to my parents, and then my sister and her kids, and then out down the line, because we don't know where this mutation of this whichever gene it is happened. And so it's very scary, especially the father of 2 small children, to consider what happened to me to be given to them through no fault of my own. Obviously, I had no idea. And I think I may have been given more pause if I knew that this was going to happen when my wife and I decided to start a family. I don't know if it would have changed my mind, but it probably would have given me more pause. I know I have other family that I'm related to by marriage inside my progeny that is on the way up on the Irish side, that they decided not to have children because they have Alzheimer's and Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, in that family. So then they're just like, we're just not going to pass this down. And so there's a precedent in our family for doing that, and we may have decided that. I don't know. But yeah, I'm 40 years old and this happened, and I'm lucky. Just anytime I mention what happened to me to anybody who knows what an aortic dissection is, every time they go, "And you lived?"
Yeah, well, I guess
it's like, well,
it's not just a life-threatening condition; it's actually a life-threatening surgery.
Yeah. I mean, the surgery itself is actually less risky than the event itself. However, yeah, I mean, you can get infections, you can, lots of things. I mean, you think about it, they open you up and the surgeon is holding your heart in his hand, cutting it open to insert the valve, which is on the inside of the heart, and then repairing the heart, sewing it back up, putting it back, reconnecting all the arteries and veins and everything else. And it's mind-blowing that can happen. I mean, it blows my mind. It literally blows my mind.
So, I mean, there's a few things I've actually jotted down here just from what you've said so far. And I mean, it seems that there's a lot of complicated science got to go on, with genetic testing and so on and so forth. And wouldn't it be easy just to pray that it's all going to be okay?
Yeah, it would have been. And so when they did the CAT scan, I think it was about 8:00 that morning, and the CAT scan is what found what was going on. And when they came back and told me what was going on, and the doctor's face was just white, and she was of Indian descent, and I have never seen somebody with that dark complected, she had no color in her face. Like, she didn't know what to say to me. She didn't know, very good bedside manner though. She was like, "What do you want to know? I can tell you all the facts about what this is." But the sound of her voice made it seem like I had already died. And, she left, and I told her to call my parents, because the second my parents would answer the phone, I would have been breaking down. And she had already called my wife, and my wife was on the way, so I didn't want to call her and interrupt her driving. But I kind of sat back and thinking, and I go, if there was ever a time to prove to me there was a God through miracles, this would be it. To magically reconnect all my arteries and to internally heal, an aneurysm in your upper aorta. That would break laws of physics. That would be it. And I kind of was chuckling to myself at that, but I sat back and I started counting my blessings of I know doctors. My sister-in-law is a surgeon. She called the best surgeon in Omaha, who is we have some top-notch doctors in our area because we have one of the best medical schools in the country. And I say blessing because I grew up religious, so it's kind of a nomenclature that I still use. But it was all about, okay, let's get to that operating table because that's what's going to save my life. And yeah, it would have been easier to just pray or believe that God, brought me to providence or whatnot, or believe in providence, or that I'm meant for something, or there's some plan, or there's some. And the interesting part about that is 3 weeks before what happened to me, one of my friends died at 44 years old from exactly what happened to me. Just fell over, dead. And the people that tell me today, well-meaning people, but I swear if I hear anybody else say, "Oh, you're dusty," it's all part of a plan, I'm at risk of punching them because.
Well, I hope you're sufficiently recovered to be able to punch them. But you don't want to put yourself back in hospital.
No, but it's like, okay, then what was the plan for my friend who left behind a wife and 2 kids? That just makes no sense. That there's some plan governing who lives and who dies. I'm kind of a believer in determinism, so I kind of wonder, what was the cause and effect that led up to my third wall not breaking? So that's an interesting discussion. But what there was no plan. There was a cause and effect, but there was no plan. I think is a good way to say it.
Yeah, I think people have, and I think it's part of our evolutionary nature that we have a tendency to think of agency causation rather than just shit happens. I'm
a runner, so I've run half marathons. I've run, the day that this happened, I had just run 6 miles, 10 kilometers for all of the rest of you around the world, and maybe that's what made it so that my body was healthy enough to withstand the pressures. I don't know. It's possible. I asked the nurses and stuff in rehab, and they're like, sometimes it's just a throw of the dice. Yeah,
that was the other thing that actually came up for me was the improbability of you surviving. And I've heard so many people say that low probability equals God. It's one of the arguments that they use a lot, isn't it, in design arguments and stuff like that.
I think about that, and I go back to, say, cosmology, where given enough n, even low probability things happen all the time. So you think about the number of stars that we can see in the sky. Supernova are really rare, but the sheer number of stars means they happen all the time. So even a low probability event happens. So to me, it was the 1 in 20 million. That one exists without God. So the one chance that I had, I just threw the dice right. That's all. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah, it's like winning the lottery in many ways. That's a low probability event.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know how the lottery works over in the United States, and I certainly don't know how it works here in Australia because it just seems incredibly complex.
1 in 500 and some million.
Is it? States. Okay. In the UK it's 1 in 14 million, or just under 13,900,000, but somebody wins almost every week.
Mm-hmm.
So low probability things happen, and
every couple months or every 3 months, somebody wins here. 500 million to 1, somebody wins.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. That low probability events do happen. Like you say, you're just going to have a large enough n, and it's going to happen at some stage. It's just like people always assign meaning to things that come out. So if I dealt you a hand of 13 cards, let's say we're playing bridge, and you just ended up with all the spades or something like that, ace, 2, 3, you'd think that was significant. But it's the same probability as any other hand that you get dealt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I played poker a lot in my life, and it's, to be dealt 2 aces versus 7-2 is the same probability.
Yeah,
I mean that's all it is, and it still happened. Both happened.
The one thing that did get me, I saw you've gone through all this operation and everything, and then I saw a picture of you on Twitter, and you were holding a heart valve, and you said, "This is what was put in my chest," and I thought, well, hold on, you just gone through all that, and you just dug it out of your chest to show people what's going on.
Yeah, I showed the picture, the demo of what when I went in for a checkup. They let me hold like a demo thing of what the valve looked like, so I could see exactly what it was. And I dug that picture up on the internet. That's not my picture, but it was surreal to hold the medical equipment that's keeping you alive, or that allows you to stay alive. And it's the audible reminder that I have of it is significant too, because it actually keeps me up at night for a little while. Makes it hard to go to sleep until I get used to it. But it's a fascinating, to sit there and hold that thing. It was almost like holding my first child for the first time.
Yeah, it's funny because some people can hear their own heartbeats, can't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's something here, and I'm actually one of those people. I can actually hear my heartbeat, and so because it's with me all the time, it's not something that I particularly think about. But you've just gone from a situation where you probably couldn't hear yours to a situation where you can now.
Yep. And yeah, I couldn't hear it before, unless I was just gotten back from a run and my heart was going a mile a minute. And now, see, here's the thing with what's the genetic thing. So my upper aorta has likely been leaking for the last 30 years. So what the condition I have has been with me and affecting me for over 30 years. So my upper ventricle is super strong because it's had to pump extra hard and extra everything to work past the leak and to get blood to the rest of my body. So there's a couple things that have happened since the surgery. One, I no longer get cold hands and feet because my circulation is so good now. Number two, it feels like somebody is on the inside of my sternum doing this, flicking, because it's so strong, and it still thinks it has to pump that hard, that it feels like my heart. It feels like just like I ran a sprint. Now they say after about 6 months that'll calm down. And here's the thing about heart surgery: it takes about a year to fully recover. So. Not looking forward to it taking a year, but I did just sign up for another half marathon in November. So I just threw my own gauntlet down to train. So we'll see how the training goes, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope it goes well. And is there any, is this a lifetime fix, or is it likely to require
a lifetime
operation?
fix? Now, there's two options you can go with when you get your valve replaced. You can get the flesh valve, which comes from pig's hearts, but those have to be replaced or fixed or something along those lines every 10 to 15 years. Being 40, I didn't want to deal with this.
Do you have to take anti-rejection drugs as well if you have that?
Nope. No. What I do have to do is take blood thinners, because a clot may form around the artificial valve. And then if that happens...
No, I was saying about if you take the pig valve, do you have to take...
No, it's... it's your body doesn't reject it because it's not a full-on... You know what? I don't even know. I'm not even going to speculate. But what I do know is on mine, you have to take blood thinners. And that's not fun, because if you get a scrape or a bruise, it can be pretty serious. Blood, in dry air, you get a bloody nose. It takes a long time for it to stop. So, not fun.
No. I was also thinking about the, you were saying about you're going to have your kids tested so that they don't, well, first of all, to find out whether they've got the gene that could cause this. And secondly, of course, you've got the concerns about them passing it on later. And you said about other members of your family having some genetically centered diseases and stuff. And I was just thinking that, within a few years, we might just be able to CRISPR those things out anyway.
It would be nice. I've read the stuff about, was it sickle cell? That they've been having some pretty high levels of success with one of the first patients to use CRISPR to treat sickle cell.
That's brilliant.
If you haven't seen that, I'll pass that along. But yeah, it's because sickle cell takes two genes for it to be turned on, for it to do what it does. This is just a one gene thing, and so if CRISPR could fix this through gene therapy in the future, that'd be great. Maybe one day they can fix the telomere degradation, and we can all live as long as we want to.
Yeah, I wanted them to have come up with that technology when I was 25. I don't really want the creaky knees and the bad back to be preserved indefinitely.
I think if we can fix telomeres, maybe we can fix the knees and the back.
Maybe.
But yeah, as far as the design of my body is concerned right now, I'd like to speak to the manager.
Yes.
Because one thing that happens when you have something that happens to me, or like to me and anybody else that faces something where it could have killed them, you get survivor guilt. And you get pretty heavy survivor guilt because you start thinking every event that happens after what happened, you start seeing it as if you were dead. How would my kids have celebrated their birthdays? What would my wife have done on her 10th anniversary? Because that was 6 weeks after what had happened. These thoughts just blow into your head, and it can be mentally taxing to work through something of that nature happening to you. And mental health, thank goodness, it's not as stigmatized as it used to be. But before I left, they had a therapist come and talk to me and make sure that I understood having those thoughts is natural. Thinking those things is natural. Don't be afraid to talk to people around you. And basically it was here's our number. This is covered by insurance. If you need to come in and lay on the couch and, work things out, then here it is. So there's a mental aspect to this too.
I was just thinking, we were talking before we started recording about the fact that you're going to be returning to work shortly. Now, you've just had and are recovering from a very major operation, and it's a COVID world at the moment. Mm-hmm. Surely this must be a concern to you, or is it a situation where you can work from home? I am
privileged in that I can work directly from home, and I don't have to go anywhere. And that's one of the reasons why I'm coming back so early. And I say early, I feel physically good enough to go back to work. Mentally, we'll see how my fatigue levels are, but they are fully prepared for me to have whatever schedule of workday I want, as long as I'm there for the meetings that I need to be there for during the day. So if I only work 3 hours during the day and need to take a nap and then work after dinner for a little while and then, and do it that way, they don't care. So they're extraordinarily accommodating for what I do. And what I do for a living is I'm an economist. So really I just do a lot of writing and reading.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so we've talked quite a lot about your recent history, but we want to get a little bit now into your ancient history, because
Am I that old? Really?
I know you're only 40, so but ancient for you. So I know that you have a deconversion story.
Correct.
And would you like to tell us a bit about that?
So I grew up a believer. My parents are fundamentalists. They are, since you're in Australia, they are Ken Ham type people.
Oh, no. Can I just apologise? Can I just apologise for us exporting Ken Ham? It's Australia's worst ever export.
You can have him back anytime.
I don't think we want him back, especially not now. He's been living in the States, and we've got very few coronavirus cases. We don't want him back.
And his brother has been like cheating business, I guess, in Australia. I've seen the headlines, but no, they donate. They go to the Ark Encounter. I'm not mad because they're donating my inheritance. I'm mad that where they're donating it. If they wanted to write all of their assets to Doctors Without Borders, wouldn't be mad. But then I have to take a step back and say that I was a believer just like they were in young earth creationism and everything. The Bible was literal to me. That's how I was raised. And it was unquestioned loyalty to God. And my whole premise of belief is that free will is bad, and that we don't understand that until we get to heaven and learn that to give up free will and say, I don't want it anymore. I've seen what it leads to. Totally just, all of you slapping your foreheads, I agree. But it was up until I met my wife and we were dating and we got into the subject of science, and I love, even up till then, I loved astronomy, as all young kids do. You look up to the sky and you stare at it with wonder, and then you see pictures of galaxies like Horsehead Nebula, and it's you fascinate, and all of a sudden you start, but somehow you separate that from the other side, and I don't know how the human brain does that, but it's very good at it. And especially was with me. So we get up to where my wife and I were dating. We bring up my wife is in the medical field, so obviously evolution is an unquestioned fact, especially for her all the way through college and everything. She's Catholic, still is, because Catholics are supporters of the theory of evolution, because Catholics, for some reason, say, well, if it can't be denied anymore, then we're just going to make it part of canon and somehow fit it in.
It would be their idea before you know it.
Exactly. So, yeah, Darwin was a Catholic, I guess.
Pope Darwin the First.
So, at first, she actually thought about leaving me because of my asinine beliefs. And I say asinine because I'm talking about my own beliefs, and I won't say that about anybody else's, but I will make fun of myself every day and twice on Sunday. And so I just didn't bring it up anymore, and I avoided the topic. And eventually I got to the point where I said, well, you know what? If I'm going to discredit what and support my beliefs, I have to go to the people that purport what they believe. If you want to learn about Christianity, you go to a Christian. That's kind of the way that I was thinking at the time, and I still think that's true today. If you want to learn about somebody's belief system, you talk to them, not try to get it third hand. And so I started looking things up, and I started finding people like Apologia, Aaron Ra, and other sites on
so this is relatively recent, is it?
This is about 5 years ago. About 5 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, Apologia has not been about a huge amount of time.
No, and even before that, there's the sect of Christianity known as Prosperity Gospel that I was understandably upset at, because I thought it was a bastardization of my faith. And obviously, if somebody wanted to make fun of God, I thought that was their own thing. But if somebody wanted to try and steal the flock type of thing that I thought Prosperity Gospel was trying to do, it made me mad. And there's a preacher out there named Justin Peters who, he is sincere, and he's probably one of the better ones out there, because he's not after money. He's not after that. He sincerely believes what he preaches. And I have respect for that, at least, that he doesn't try to, he doesn't say, pray and everything will be okay. He says pray and it might be, if it's the whole God's will thing. And he suffers from MS, so he comes from kind of a different background of how prayer works and everything like that. So I think he's much more I guess, realistic in how that works. But his shtick was, let's be skeptical about what the prosperity gospel teaches, and he teaches people how to be skeptical, unknowingly teaching me to be skeptical and how to be skeptical, unknowingly teaching me to question my faith through a skeptic's eyes, taking it one step further, not questioning the prosperity gospel, but questioning the gospel and everything around it. And that's kind of where things really started. And then the whole, okay, if I'm going to be skeptical and everything, I have to go after what other people believe and try to dissuade them from that, thinking I can get my wife into my belief system, and I end up actually taking on hers. As far as the science is concerned, I'm not going to convert to Catholicism or anything like that. But it was, for me, it was interesting that it was an internet pastor who puts out really good videos on the evils of the prosperity gospel and what it does to people and how to be skeptical. And he doesn't say it's being a skeptic, he calls it being a good Berean, which were early Christians that were translators and interpreters of the Bible that really were exegesis instead of eisegesis. And that's kind of where a lot of the interpretations, better, I would say, more authentic interpretations come from. And so being a good skeptic, to me, translated into taking things even further than what Reverend Peters had expected somebody to who listened to his side of the story. And that was an interesting time in my life, because as that type of Christian, that is your identity. And if that is your identity and it's taken away from you, there's a lot of mental anguish that happens with that. And again, I get back to mental health. But at the same time, all this was happening. My grandparents on my dad's side died that summer. They were 95 and 97 respectively. And that was hard to deal with at the same exact time of losing your faith. And then everyone around you is talking, in the platitudes of Christianity. And here I am, unable to say anything. Because, honest to God, I fear for losing my connection with my family if I were to come out to them. They still don't know, and I don't see a reason to bring it up to them at this time in my life, because what's it going to do? It's only going to cause harm at this point. They're near their 70s, and in their house, if they say bow your head and pray before a meal, I'll bow my head and I'll go through the motions, because it's respectful to do that in somebody else's house. But I maybe Dad has an inkling that I've kind of fallen away, but I don't think that they have a clue as to me losing my faith. And I think it would just devastate them too. It would be bad.
So you don't want me to send them the link to this video?
No. And that's kind of a reason why I use the moniker that I do. I don't use my name, and it's kind of a protection mechanism that if they were to Google my name, this isn't going to come up. And so there's that. My sister is all in fundamentalist too. What's it going to do but harm at this point? Because I know how the personalities of my sister and my mom, and they're very argumentative and they're very stubborn, and I couldn't convince them. My mom is very political in what her Facebook posts are, to the point where I had to unfollow her. And you could list out all the facts in the world and she won't change her mind. So what am I going to do on this side? And I don't think she's really harming anybody at this point. She's not beating people over the head with the Bible or anything like that, or causing mental anguish. I don't think anybody, maybe my nibblings, who, if you didn't know, the plural for nephew and niece is nibbling. So that causes a little bit of anguish in me. But at the same time, I know that me having a little bit of silence is probably for the greater good. But it was 3-4 years ago where I finally, my wife and I were out having lunch, and I just looked at her and I said, I got something to tell you. And she's thinking, oh God, he's going to leave me. And I go, no, I go, I don't think I can say I believe in the God anymore. And she went, oh, thank God. Because she thought I was going to say something way worse than that, like I want a divorce or something like that. And she was just like, okay. Okay, so this was 3 years ago now, because our first son had been born. And so the instant conversation that came up was, what do we do about our children, and their education? And so I said, I'm not going to give them a sugar coating. If they ask me what I believe, they will get the unvarnished truth when they're old enough, when we think they're old enough to understand what's going on. And I will not get in the way of you telling them either. And at the appointed time, they will make up their mind on their own. And that's, if they say at 14 years old, I don't want to go to church because I think it's BS, then they don't have to go. If they said they want to go because they want to be part of mom's faith or whatever, that's fine, and if they change their mind at 18, they're not going to get kicked out of our house. They're not going to get disconnected. As far as this side, unless they're hurting people, we're not going to disassociate from them. So I want to make sure that they feel that they can tell us everything and anything regarding this, and never feel that we're going to act hostile towards them. And part of that, I think part of what helps in this issue is that their mom and me, my wife, are very science oriented now. She is, evolution is a fact. She knows how to read studies. She knows how to read, and go through and find BS and stuff. She's a registered dietitian. So if you're wondering, and one of our favorite things is to go through claims made on commercials and TV and, through studies and find out how they're BS. And eventually we're going to teach our kids how to read, scientific studies and go, oh, you're basing something off a study that says n equals 5. I think that's BS, and find out what that is. And so I think even if, the kids say, I want to be Catholic, they're still going to get a great basis in science, and they're not going to get a rejection like they would say if they were raised under my parents or my sister.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, your life's just been saved by science. Mm-hmm. If in the future that we can CRISPR out, genes that cause ALS or whatever, that's science. Was it Richard Dawkins that said science because it works, bitches?
And yeah, and my wife never once did she try to bring up God during the whole ordeal. Never once did she try to force that on me, and she even shut some people down while they were trying to say there's a plan, when they were talking to me. She's like, just no, don't say that. And so she understands my position, and she's full respect for it, and I have full respect for hers, because we're married, and that's what married people do. And we just don't. A lot of it is we just don't talk about it. I only have one hard and fast rule: she doesn't give any money to the Catholic Church. That's my only rule. I go, if you want to donate to charity, there's plenty of great charities that you can donate to, but I'll be damned if 8% of every dollar you give them is going to defend the pedophiles.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether I should bring that up, but that was my first thought when you said about not donating to.
Yeah. So no money goes in the collection plate. If she wants to go to church and put $20 somewhere, it can go to Doctors Without Borders or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I give most of my charity, I must admit, and I make a fair bit of charitable donation each year, and I always give it to animal charities because I think they're quite often underfunded.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
And today, you know, after everything that's happened to me and where the research came from for my heart valve, St. Jude's Hospital will probably be on my mind. Mainly because if you go to Doctors Without Borders and St. Jude's, their administrative costs are covered elsewhere. So every dollar that you donate actually goes towards research or sending a doctor overseas to save people's lives. So I think that's a great way to run a charity, is to find some wealthy donor to take care of all the admin, and then you have all the donations actually go towards what people think they're going towards.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And unlike, as you were talking about the prosperity gospel, churches don't have to declare what goes in there, do they? And
no.
Yeah, I think
I think they do tell you how much goes towards, like, where certain expenses are, and they do declare how much, you know, goes towards, say, community help and everything like that. But even the good churches, only 10-15% goes towards feeding the poor or anything like that. The rest is for building and salaries and everything else.
Yeah, well, I think when you look at sort of Joel Osteen's lifestyle, I think it's pretty clear where most of the money that goes in there is going.
Yeah, Kent Hovind or what's his face, the dude.
Kenneth Copeland. Yeah, yes. as I call him, Mr. Plastic Surgery.
Oh man.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's funny.
Creflo Dollar has the best name to be a prosperity gospel guy, though.
The thing is, why do the believers never hold these people's feet to the fire? You know, Kenneth Copeland blew away the coronavirus. You know, since he did that, there's only been like 80,000 deaths in the US. Why do people never actually say, look, you know, clearly you were unable to blow the coronavirus away?
Identity. You hold, and this is what made it hard for me with letting it go, was it was so much a part of my identity and growing up in every part of my life and every facet, that to go against that is hard. Number one. Number two, if you're in a social group, going against that social group is very hard. We're social creatures. I think evolutionarily, you know, we want to fit in. We want to fit in with a certain group. And if that group is telling you that this is real, you're apt to actually believe that. So I think part of religion's hold on people actually comes from the actual evolutionary process itself.
Yeah, I've no doubt about that. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
I think religion may have actually been an aid to our survival at the very early point, because it made social structures and a cohesion. It didn't need to be religion. It could have been something else, but I think that's what took that spot.
Yeah, I think there's certain things that are, you know, what they call metaphorical truths. You know, they're not necessarily literally true, but they can help survival. You know, if you always run away when you hear the rustle in the bushes, then the time that it actually is a tiger, you run away.
Or a snake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, the snake's evil. I need to stay away from it. Well, that probably saved a lot of people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got the most deadly ones in the world, obviously, here in Australia. I think 9 of the 10 most deadly creatures in the world live.
I've seen Australia. One of your spiders kill a snake.
Yeah. Fortunately, those things don't actually live in the suburbs very much.
Very much?
No, hardly, not at all, really. I do hear of people, because the funnel web, which is the worst spider, is mainly over in New South Wales, and apparently they get caught in people's swimming pool filters quite a bit.
Yeah.
Just because of the way they live, and but I don't think anybody's actually nobody's died of a funnel web bite for a long time, because obviously all the hospitals have anti-venom on and stuff like that. People get very sick very quickly from a funnel web bite, they really do. What we get over here mostly in the West is redbacks. And I always wonder, where redbacks used to live before they lived in people's garages. That's a question. That's a question for evolutionists. Where did redbacks used to live before they lived in people's garages?
They were designed to live in a garage.
Yeah.
So, and to get to your question of why do people have a hard time holding other people's feet to the fire, I think mental health is also such a stigma within religion that people don't get help that they need to be able to be themselves. So, for example, I went to school to be a minister. That's how much of a believer I was. And, in a school of 2,000 people, we didn't have a mental health counselor. And we had no access either. If you wanted help, it was not part of our insurance plan or anything like that. And you had to have your parents' insurance and you had to go off-site. And we were probably 20 miles from the nearest place that had anything like that. And me suffering from major social anxiety for most of my life, it's imagine feeling part of a group, having social anxiety, and imagine how hard it would be to go against the group for that type of situation. And so the lack of caring or the lack of even wanting to make it available for mental health, especially for young people. I mean, who needs it more than college kids when they first go off and are trying to figure themselves out, and maybe had parents who thought that they just needed a belt whipping instead of actually going to figure out what they need for help. Colleges need to be much more supportive of what's going on in that. So I think there's a lot to do with the stigma of mental health within religion, and what goes on within that, because it wasn't there for me. So, and I know this is an anecdote, but if it wasn't there for me, it wasn't there for 2,000 other students at my school.
Yeah, there's an attitude of if you're right with God, it will be all right.
I did hear that say, "Oh, you don't have enough faith. Oh, you just need to lay your worries on God." And I'm just like, I would love to. I would love nothing more to be able to do that. That would be awesome. To be able to do that would have been great. My college experience would have been much better.
Yeah.
But you can't. It doesn't work that way. And once I did finally get out of college and then started working where I had insurance that would cover things like that, and started seeing someone and started taking medication, oh my gosh, it got better. Who would have thought?
Yeah. So I take it from going through your story that you were saying about the political stuff on Facebook pages and things like that your parents are ardent Trump supporters and that type of stuff.
So it's funny because my parents were nothing but disparaging towards Obama, but now they're posting stuff like, "Remember when we always respected the president?" I'm like, it's just... So, yeah, and obviously being in the Midwest, it's very red. I live in a Nebraska is one of 2 states where we can split our electoral college votes. So we get a little bit of political action in here because we might actually go blue this year, our little district, because I live in Omaha. And, we're much more progressive in Omaha than it is everywhere else in the state, much more progressive in Omaha than it is pretty much everywhere else up and down the line. And so I don't feel as alienated here, but holy cow, the people that are ardent Trump supporters are just nuts. And the religious people and how they mentally gymnastic around, and I don't even know how to call it gymnastics because it's more than that, of what type of person Trump is and how they can support something like that. You'd think that if they sat down and thought about it, oh, Biden hasn't been married 3 times, cheated, and paid a porn star, to stay silent. That seems like it's much more. Oh, but abortion, is everything to them. And the reason I know my mom doesn't take evidence is I showed her the chart of the past 40 years of presidents, so my lifetime, and the abortion rates during each presidential term. And the 2 Democrats, Obama and Clinton, had the highest rate of decline in number of abortions. And that has to do with the fact that they expanded healthcare, they expanded education, they expanded, contraceptive access. If you want to stop abortion and be pro-life, those are your 3 things. Not making it illegal, because that just forces it underground. So, and she rejected that. And so that I just gave up at that point with presenting evidence. I'm just like, I'm done. But people don't listen to that. They want it illegal. And it's sad that they can't see that, Biden, if we elect Biden and we have a blue wave, what's going to happen is we're going to get more healthcare, we're going to get more sex ed, and we're going to get better access to contraceptives to females, and we're going to stay out of their lives and their decision. Even though, even through that, the number of abortions have been proven to go down. And if you're pro-life, that should be your goal. Personally, I think abortion is disgusting, but I am not for making it illegal. I am for making sure every woman who wants to be on the pill can have it free of charge. For every, making condoms available for men, free of charge. Anything anybody needs, in their family planning aspect of their life should be free of charge or subsidized by the taxpayers, for all you right wingers out there. And that'll make the abortion numbers drop dramatically. And because it's been proven to, empirically. So
it's interesting. A few weeks ago, I had Clint Haycock on. I don't know if you've come across Clint. He has a podcast, and the name of the podcast will pop into my head in a moment. But let's just focus on what he was saying. He was saying that until about, I think it was about the 1980s, so 70s, 80s, that abortion wasn't really the big issue. It was just that all these church leaders got together and found one particular, item that believers were broadly in agreement on, and then they hammered that to try and get everybody into line to vote as a block.
Led by guess who?
Yeah, it was the Mindshift podcast. The Mindshift podcast and it was an episode of that I was listening to. So I've been listening to that a lot. It's a very good podcast.
And Jerry Falwell and Billy Graham were the designers behind that.
Yeah, he was saying that. So it's only relatively recent history that this has become such a big issue, and it's their main issue because they get people to line up behind it and vote as a block in accordance with that.
Yep. Yeah, in the early 70s, Republicans didn't give a shit about abortion because it wasn't an issue. And Barry Goldwater had a lot to do with the shift in the Republican Party that started everything, and then Nixon finished it off. And we're seeing the end result of it today. There's a guy, Innuendo Studios is the name of the channel, and he did a video called "The Death of Euphemism." If you were sitting in the early debates where Trump in 2016 was talking, he said things you don't say. He said things outright racist things like they're only sending us their rapists and their murderers across the border. You used euphemisms, to say those things earlier, and now that's dead. And imagine the rabidness of the voting bloc where you can say stuff like that and it won't dissuade you and it won't dissuade them from voting for you. That's how far the Republican Party has fallen. They're just that the mask is off, and that party, it just needs to go away. And I say that with a little bit of sorrow, because of the beginnings of the Republican Party were so pure. It was the anti-slavery party. It was formed in Wisconsin to be the abolitionist party. And it was why people got behind Lincoln. Today, there's no resemblance. There's zero resemblance for what the Republicans were versus what they are today. And it's sad, because they could be so much more if they went back to their roots.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know much of that history, obviously. I'm not an American and so on. And so what I see is mostly, what we see today. And yeah, the other thing that Clint's on about, because he's always on about this dominionist sort of agenda, and the Seven Mountains, I'm sure you're familiar with all this sort of stuff. And, it's been successful. At the end of the day, you've got Mike Pence as the VP, and when I first saw The Handmaid's Tale, I thought that could be subtitled Mike Pence's View for America.
Yeah.
And it's deeply worrying, and I think that the first thing that they've got to do to avert any chance of that sort of dominionist rule becoming a reality is Biden has to win.
Mm-hmm. And it's people have, I think, wisened up a little bit. So here's the big campaign. So here's The Economist in me coming out and the look at what things are. So economies are won and lost on the economy. People vote with their stomachs. If you can't put food on the table, who's currently in office obviously isn't doing you any good. So you have to really look at what the populism angle is going to look like. And in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, Florida, those are your major swing states. Sometimes Iowa, sometimes Nevada. And those are where most of the coronavirus job losses are centered around. And a lot of the manufacturing is left there, and a lot of the things that have gone wrong over the last 4 years have been centered around those areas, which is why Trump won 4 years ago, because Hillary didn't visit those spots and just assumed they would be blue. And Trump went there and talked to them about putting food on the table. That's why he won. They don't care about a border wall. They don't care about, these other things unless it has to do with them being able to put food on the table. And when Trump says make America great again or keep America, in his worst blunder ever is to use the words keep America great. Because if you look around right now, what's great? Our economy is in shambles. There's 40 million unemployed. There's 20 million underemployed. Workforce participation is way down. You just go on down the line. It's bad. And if this is great, I don't want to know what bad looks like. And people will vote with their stomach. And if Trump somehow gets the economy into a miraculous turnaround, he'll win. Because people will view it as his doing. It ain't going to happen, based on my estimation and a lot of other highly educated people. So when you look at why Biden is actually leading in Texas, which is a red state through and through, and was never even, has never even been like a challenge to anyone, that's why. It's because people can't put food on the table. If you couldn't put food on the table, you would worry about the leadership of the nation. And it's very true. Armies march on their stomachs the same way that the voters vote with their stomachs. There's that old saying that armies march on their stomachs, and it's the same for voters.
How do you feel about Biden as a candidate? Because a lot of people are saying
he's too right wing.
Yeah.
But it depends on who he picks for VP, because the VP will probably have significant influence over him, and will be much more of the statesperson that travels and does the foreign policy. Will be the VP's job, because he's 80 years old. And whether or not he's suffering early stage dementia or not, I don't care, because background, I get to work with the government a lot. So I understand the president gets to float, and I'm going to use a terminology here, gets to float 3 boats if they have 2 terms. And by what I mean by boats is major policy shift. So one of Obama's was, his universal health care plan. So if you think about a politician coming up for election, you go figure out what their big policy shift item is, and that's one of the boats they're going to try to float. Now, if you get to float 3 boats, one of them will make it through. Obama got Obamacare. He had a few others that sunk. And that's just the way of things. But all the branches of government and all the agencies and everything under already have their long-term goals already set out. And unless there's a catastrophe, that doesn't change. So the workings of the U.S. government and everything will be much the same no matter which one is elected. The only problem is with one of those, I don't know that a catastrophe won't happen. With Biden, now obviously there's natural catastrophes and things like that, but a catastrophe of human making, a night of the long knives or crystal knocked level like that, I fear that from Trump. And that seems overblown, but I'd rather not take the risk. Having won a 1 in 20 million shot already in my life, I don't want to have to win. There's risks that I don't really feel like taking, and that's one of them. And so with Biden, I don't think that you're going to see that. Obviously, I could be wrong, but I just don't see it there. And with his VP pick being the statesperson, and with him basically being a figurehead ahead of state, that's fine. That's fine, because I know how the government works, and it's not that big of a deal to have a president that isn't front and center all the time. Some people think one of our better presidents was Calvin Coolidge, because he didn't do anything. He just basically let the government. He did do things, but it was mainly behind the scenes efficiency issues, and allowing the government agencies to do what they wanted to feel what their major goals were. So like today, our Securities and Exchange Commission is working on a lot of policy on making sure that financial advisors and bankers are doing what's in the best interest of their clients. So there's a regulation called Reg BI, which stands for Reg Best Interest. That's not going to go away no matter who's elected. That whole policy coming down the line, unless there's a catastrophe. So if you can take that microcosm and spread it out over the whole government, that's what you're going to see. My sleep mode keeps coming on. So sorry about the blackouts. And the food on the table issue, I think, is going to make Biden win, because I don't see the economy coming back anytime soon.
Well, I hope so, because when you've got a situation like Trump has appointed something like 200 judges, is it? It was 196 or something the last time I heard a count.
Yeah.
And many of them are not really competent for their position. They're all right wing. They're all following a particular agenda. And if he gets a chance to nominate some more, it's going to take a long, long time to undo all of that.
Especially with a Supreme Court justice probably retiring soon, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So we need somebody. That's the one that's one of the boats that a president gets to float, is who to appoint for the Supreme Court if an appointee needs to be made.
Yeah.
So Trump has thrown out 4 boats, and two have sailed. So he got his tax cuts and he got his judge appointed.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so when I first met you, as I said right back at the beginning, it was in an after party on Neil 604 Atheists, and it was clear to me that you and Neil have known each other for a little while because of the way you were interacting. So how did you come across Neil, and when did you start attending after parties and things?
So let's see here. I met Neil on Twitter, and Twitter was my entrance into most of the quote unquote atheistic YouTube world. It is how I found a lot of people. And so I just used the hashtag I'm an atheist or something like that and kind of said, hey, I'm out here, and he picked up and followed me and I followed him back. And he said, this was early in his era of doing deconversion stories. So he had me on. And then I kind of disappeared off the radar for a little while. And then once I got a webcam, I actually started saying, hey, if there's a time for me to, or no, I didn't. Okay, so you were the second after party I had ever been on. So this.
Oh, is that it? I thought you'd been on more. No. Okay.
Recent development for me because I haven't had a webcam for very long. Number one. Number two, I work and parenting and everything else had consumed most of my life. And frankly, I had a lot of time over the last 7 weeks on my hands. And so I'm gonna actually keep up with it. Mikey, I was a guest on his podcast talking about economics, and so it's a lot of fun. It's a good escape, to get on with Neil. Neil's probably one of the best active listeners that I've ever met, and I've learned a lot from him. You're getting there, you're up there right there with him with that. So it's a skill, and one that I don't have that I would love to work on. But Neil probably helped me through because when I did my story with him, that was right after my grandparents had died, and so he actually kind of was a little bit of a therapist, I guess. And then also right after I had deconverted, you remember the movie Event Horizon?
Yeah.
So there's that scene of hell, that disgusting, gross, grotesque scene when they view the other dimension. That was my nightmare for probably a year to year and a half after my letting go of faith, because hell was so real to me, growing up and all the way through, that imagery was just burned into my subconscious. And then after talking with Neil and doing my story with him, it started to go away. So even after several years ago of doing my story with him, I kept emailing him and telling him how thankful I was that I found somebody to be able to tell my story and to be it was cathartic to do that, because it helped my mental health, honestly. And that's why I continue to do this, is to normalize this way of life and this system. I don't want to say a belief system, or system of non-belief, or however you want to put it, but to normalize it so people don't feel that it's out there, or that it's odd, or that they need to hide it. And then number two is to hear that, they're not alone, and if you need help, go get it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess coming from a religious background, you're used to having community. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people who have left faith say that they had community, and they've lost that feeling of community. And personally, as a lifelong atheist, I don't feel that. And it's interesting. A few weeks ago, I was talking to somebody who was trying to persuade me of their religious view, and they were saying everybody has this hole inside of them, and I'm like, I don't. I've never had that community that you have from religion. I've never had that sort of feeling of a hole inside or any of that. Not at all. I'm somebody who's gradually over the course of my life become happier in my own skin, happier in my own space, and happier with where I'm at morally now. That and it's been a journey, and in my life I haven't always acted in a way that I would consider morally now, but I kind of like the person I am now a lot more from having completed that journey. But it's no community, and to be honest, I feel happier having these sort of conversations over the internet than actually being with people. I'm quite happy being on my own most of the time.
I have noticed one thing since my deconversion is I've become much more empathetic. I've become much more realizing how I acted prior to, and I've spent a lot of time trying to track certain people down to at least break bread and apologize for some things that I said, especially with some people that came out of the closet, homosexual or transsexual wise, and obviously my opinion during my Christianity days was very negative of that, and so I've sent some emails and some letters saying I've realized the error of my ways, and type of thing, and just say, if you never want to talk to me again, that's fine. I just needed to get this out there that says you are valid, and no one should take that away from you. And so it's been mentally health. I keep going back to mental health, but it was much better for me, and it is much better for me to feel this way and to think this way than it was prior, because it was so hate filled prior to. I didn't realize how much hate I was spewing towards people until now.
Yeah, I think the more in touch you get with science behind things and the reality of things, as you say, the more empathetic you become. And I was talking to Brady Harding last week. I don't know if you come across Brady on Twitter. He also has a podcast called The Life After, and we were talking about the fact he's gay, and about how he felt about himself growing up. When he started to realise that he was attracted to people of the same sex, and so on. And
even effeminate men who say don't want to be the head of household in their marriage, the church reacts very negatively towards that, because they have a very set role of how men should act. And you don't even have to be gay to be discriminated or oppressed mentally by the church. All you have to do is not be the ideal, and you get shamed. And that, for how different everyone is, it's just a bad way to live.
Yeah. And I think what Brady and I came up with was the phrase empathy bypass. And that's quite often what these people have, is an empathy bypass.
Yeah.
I just, as somebody who is heterosexual, I never made a choice to be heterosexual. I just fancied girls. And I don't see, how somebody can go through their life and they were attracted to females and not see that they never made it a conscious choice for that to be the case, and why it should be different for somebody who's same-sex attracted. And the other point...
Because they're possessed by demons, obviously.
The other point you made there is it? I mean, I don't consider myself particularly, sort of effeminate. I lift weights and all this sort of stuff. Spend a lot of time at the gym, but my wife is just better at certain things that would be traditional male roles than I am. She's much better at getting screwdrivers out and fixing stuff than I am. And because of that, I'm quite happy to do the washing up and most of the cooking. It's a partnership. Marriage is a partnership. You just do what you're best at. It doesn't have to be any sort of traditional role.
Yep. And I would say my wife and I's marriage has probably gotten stronger over the last 4 years, even though, and I don't think it's because of the kids. I think it's because I finally actually feel comfortable with myself. I think I've finally just come to the realization of I am who I am. And you know what? If I have to burn in hell for all eternity because I was nice to people on earth, so be it.
Yeah. I think that the unattraction of heaven is that, you know, I don't really want to go there and spend time with the sort of people you mentioned earlier, like Ken Ham, Ken Hovind, and Kenneth Copeland.
The question I think that took me over the edge was this: if you are a Christian and you go to heaven and say your child rejects your faith and does not go to heaven, how can heaven be heaven without your loved ones? So, you know, if you can you experience bliss knowing your child is burning for all eternity? I mean, think of the psychopathic, sociopathic type of mental frame you have to think that heaven is heaven when you know that that's going on.
Yeah. I think somebody said that you know, they didn't believe in hell. It was just separation from God, and I said, well, if I can watch the cricket, I don't care if I'm in the same stand as God.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, just as long as Australia wins the Ashes game, right?
Exactly. So, well, with any luck, somebody will get the cure for coronavirus soon, and we'll get some cricket back.
That would be nice. You know, I actually enjoy putting cricket on in the background and catching up with it every once in a while. So yeah, I enjoy all sports, and I'm glad Premier League is, you know, started back up. So actually live, and that was fun to watch today. So I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think the Aussie rules have started up again, but I must admit, I haven't been watching it. My team has been so bad over the last few seasons that I sort of, you know, after about game 5, I've sort of lost interest anyway. So, yeah, you shouldn't just watch them when they're winning, but, you know, man, it's bad when they just lose all the time.
Yeah, I think Manchester United played today, and that was just fun to watch.
Yeah.
I don't have
What's happened to them since... What's happened to them since Ferguson went? They're not the same.
You know, I really don't know. Man U is not a club that I follow at all, and I'm more actually into like UEFA and the countries, you know, the country teams playing. Obviously, having half my family in Sweden, and the other half here in the States. I like rooting for the Swedes and the US. So I don't really pay attention to like the club soccer. I pay attention to the national teams, and so because 4 years ago, you know, UEFA was playing and during the birth of my son, and so I was, you know, while we were in the hospital, we were able to watch soccer in that respect. But yeah, the clubs, I have no idea.
No, I don't really.
It's still live sports right now.
Yes, live sports would be great. Yeah, I'm missing the cricket.
Because UEFA is supposed to be this year, and it's been pushed off. UEFA, the European Football Championship. Although the Swedes were like placed in the same group as Germany, Portugal, and Spain, so it's like, yeah, they ain't making it out of that.
Well, it's a low probability event. So to complete a circle on this conversation, if they did, it's probably God. Anyway, it's been a
trio in that group. You and I may have a conversation about a God existing.
Yeah. Anyway, Irish, we've been going for quite a while. I don't know how long this is going to be, but well over an hour, I think we've been recording. So it's probably time to say adieu for this conversation. Maybe we'll do this again at some stage if we come up with something particular that we want to talk about, because I really do like having these conversations, and certainly you'll be my go-to man if I come up with anything economic that needs discussing.
I doubt it. They call it the dismal science for a reason.
But no, I really appreciate you joining me for today. And yeah, I'll try and get this out in the next day or two. I've got quite a few images from things that we talked about that I want to click in, and that'll take a bit of production time amongst all the other things I've got producing at the moment. So, but hopefully within a day or two I'll get this out, and I'll send you a link as soon as it's out.
Awesome. Well, I had fun. I thank you. You asked really good questions, and it was, again, a lot of fun.
Thank you.